Mayor Lightfoot, good to have you here.
It's my pleasure.
I was preparing yesterday and I found a YouTube video of you in an interview, and I was like, what better way to prepare myself for this than to watch your interview with Stephen Colbert, which was pretty good. And he started with some rapid fire questions, and I'll just have one. I lived in Chicago for 2 years from 2007 to 2009, and my wife and I went to Northwestern, the other school, the one that doesn't use a lot of math. But we remember the first time that it snowed in October, we were like ecstatic. We were fascinated. But then it snowed in April, and it was really disappointing. So, has the weather changed in Chicago?
I'd like to say as mayor, I have all control over the weather to make it accommodate whatever it is that we're doing. But no, the snow still flies in Chicago. But we have seasons, and when you go through a tough winter, as we do in Chicago and the Midwest, when the spring comes, and particularly the summer, it makes it all that much sweeter.
Okay, so it hasn't changed. So I'll visit you in June of next year if you invite me there. I want to start talking to you about your background. If I understand correctly, you were not in politics. You're the first African American mayor of the city of Chicago. You were LGBTQ. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey to getting to this position that you hold today?
Well, no, I have never run for or been elected to any other office, which when I started talking to my wife about this possibility, she, of course, thought I was crazy. But why I started this journey, if I think back on it, is because I just felt like in a city that had so much wealth, so much potential, that too many of our residents, particularly Black and brown residents, are simply being left behind. I really started the journey, if I may, because we were experiencing a high level of crime and violence. And then as I dug into the issues, it led me to think, really, the root cause of the problem, because it was a persistent issue in Chicago, was poverty, the lack of opportunity in too many of our neighborhoods. And I started with thinking I could work within the previous administration to really uplift the plight of people in these communities and why it was so incredibly important to invest. And if you know our city, on the south and the west sides, which are majority Latinx and African American. But what I found is that there was really no plan for these neighborhoods. And I just firmly believe that we cannot be a great global city and leave so many parts of our population behind. If we're not creating hope and opportunity in tangible ways, then we are missing the mark pretty profoundly. I think a lot about an incident involving a young boy who was killed about 2 years ago. He was 13 years old. His family was Mexican American. They really struggled a lot, and he was really lured into the gang life that preyed upon this young boy. And in the context of that very difficult and traumatic experience, there was a young man that was on my mayor's youth council from Little Villages, which is one of our majority Mexican neighborhoods in our city. And he said to me, I spent my whole life walking by murals in my community, but murals with the names of people who have been killed in our community. And that has stuck with me to that day. I want young boys and girls in all of our communities not to be walking by murals that commemorate death and tragedy and trauma. I want them to be able to walk by beautiful art, green spaces, vibrant retail and other kinds of jobs, and know that their future lies within our communities, not elsewhere, but also dealing with the reality that too many of our communities have simply been left without. And if you think about where we are now, really recovering from COVID, we've got the most diverse economy in the country in Chicago. And we are doing phenomenally well. I'm happy to share some data points that back that out. But we have to be intentional about making sure that that economic prosperity reaches every single one of our neighborhoods. And the government can't solve every problem, but we can absolutely be leaders in setting the course. We can put our money where our mouth is and making sure that the resources that are going out, the monies that we've received from the federal government, the monies that we have generated ourselves, that they are going to reach those communities, those individuals, and those businesses that are most in need. And being very intentional about that, and I would say unapologetic about building wealth in Black and brown communities is what I have fought for from day one, and we're going to continue to do, because to me, that is the only way to prosperity for our entire city. And as I say to crowds that look a little different than this, some of the white business people in Chicago, neglect is not cost-free. We all pay for it. We pay for it in the way that we have to have additional policing. We pay for it in the crime that flares in our communities. We pay for it by our young people feeling like their destiny is not in our city, that their destiny, unfortunately, for many, they feel like it's preordained to be a part of the illegal economy. I want to flip that script completely on its head and give hope and inspiration by infusing these communities with resources.
So thanks for that answer. I think one of the things that some of the communities are talking about, and I was mentioning, I think, Cabrera, is the lack of role models. So just taking the chance to do it and try it, I commend you, and we're glad to have you here again, as we said. Let's stay on the topic of the economy. So you come in as a mayor, COVID hits. How was that experience, and how has Chicago come out of it?
Well, I can tell you there's obviously no playbook for how you respond to what is hopefully a once-in-a-lifetime global pandemic. We were fortunate in Chicago. Don't get me wrong, we had our challenges, which I'll talk about in a moment. But I think the thing that really served us well is we have a Department of Public Health that is very prepared. And they prepare all year round. They run training exercises. They make sure that they've got equipment that's ready. And here's an irony that I think a lot of people don't know. In the fall of 2019, so long before anyone had heard of COVID, there was a national training exercise in Chicago. And the problem that they were trying to solve was a virus of undefined properties that originated in China. And so this was something that was done. We had federal partners there, state partners, a lot of emergency management professionals led by our Department of Public Health. Little do we know, a few months later, we have to put those lessons learned into real action. But one of the challenges that we had early on was making sure that we were understanding the impact of COVID-19 on various communities within Chicago. We had some challenges early because testing was springing up everywhere, but they weren't collecting demographic information. But once we started to see that demographic information roll in, our worst nightmare was really realized. We got data late in March of 2020, so about a few weeks after COVID really hit us, showing that African Americans were dying at 7 times the rate of any other demographic. And we knew that the case rates are also very, very high throughout Latinx Chicago. So we sprung into action. We formed something called the Racial Equity Rapid Response Team. And really what the purpose of this team was to make sure that we were in partnership with local stakeholders, and local medical providers, local community healthcare workers, and going deep into those communities driven by the data where we were seeing the greatest need, the biggest challenges. And as a result of building that infrastructure, my mantra through those early days was, we're not going to build any temporary infrastructure. We're going to build relationships. We're going to build infrastructure on which we can scale up when we hopefully get to the other side of COVID. And what we were able to do as a result of that is work with our community partners to make, frankly, Latinx Chicago one of the highest vaccinated demographics in our city. At a time when the vaccines finally came in December of 2020, and there was essentially a tiering of who got the vaccinations when, don't tell the federal government, but we decided to blow that up a little bit because we knew that if we didn't get a handle on getting those most vulnerable communities vaccinated, not just the elders and the people with underlying conditions, but everybody who was eligible, whole households, that if we didn't get a handle on that very quickly, that we were going to be in serious trouble. So working with those same community partners, we went deep into communities. We organized something called Protect Chicago Plus. So bringing vaccine and using various channels, using federally qualified healthcare centers. So these are local community clinics that provide healthcare for free and without regard to citizenship status. They have been so critical to our delivery of care during COVID. We would never have been able to survive without it. And I'm going to tell you, as a result of this, and one other thing that I'll talk about, I was on a panel discussion this morning with the White House talking about community healthcare corps that we stood up. We took federal dollars and hired initially a cohort of about 450 people. We were very intentional in making sure that we were going into areas of our city that had the biggest economic challenges and giving people who were on the margins of employment an opportunity to participate in this core. A fundamental precept was an earn as you learn possibility. So we were paying them, but we were also giving them the opportunity to get free education to further and strengthen their skill set. And we've transitioned over, we've hired now about 800 of these folks. We transitioned about 150 into permanent healthcare jobs. So working in community clinics, working as social workers, and doing other work, and a number of them are continuing their education. But these things that we did, and really we stood these up on the fly, but with a thoughtfulness around, again, looking not just to the moment and the immediate crisis, but what do we need to do to make sure that going forward, we bring people into care. Because in Black and brown communities, there's a great deal of suspicion about the healthcare system. There's a great deal of suspicion about government. So we needed to have trusted community partners to help communicate why these communities and individuals should take the virus seriously, break through a lot of myths and misinformation that's spread out. But we were playing the long game and making sure that we had a plan that would help these communities in the out years. All of our communities are plagued with high blood pressure, diabetes, and the other things that frankly shorten our life expectancy. And we wanted to make sure that we're doing everything we can to be stronger and healthier on the backside of COVID.
Taking on the Latinx topic and integrating a little bit more within our Capital Forum, you have a big community of Latinos and specifically Mexicans. Probably like the 5th or 6th largest Mexican populated city, top 10.
Second.
Including the
Outside.
countries.
Okay, yeah, we're about
the Mexican city.
Okay. But in the U.S., we have the second largest Mexican national population, and that doesn't take into consideration all those who are of Mexican heritage who have lived in our city for many generations.
Probably since the 1920s. But what brings you to Mexico City? Why spend your time here?
Well, for the reasons that you said. The Mexican population in our city is an intrinsic part of who we are, our identity. And making sure that we are building and strengthening the bilateral relationship just makes sense for us, given the number of Mexican nationals and people of Mexican origin that live in our city. We know that there's close bonds. Many of the people that are in our delegation travel back and forth to Mexico City and other parts of Mexico on a regular basis. Many of our residents come back and forth because they still have family here. And so making sure that we understand the opportunities to strengthen that bilateral relationship. Certainly we're focused on the economic opportunities that exist, but I think there's more that we can do in thinking creatively about strengthening the social and emotional bonds between our two cities. It just makes sense for us to do this. There's a lot of enthusiasm when we announced that we were going to be coming to Mexico City, and I think the list was about 200 long of people saying, I want to be part of this delegation. So it shows to me that there's a great interest and desire for us to better communicate, to deepen the relationship, and really build the bridge between the Chicago as a great city in the U.S. and Mexico City as a great city in this country and other parts of Mexico. And particularly given the climate that we're in right now, I can't have this conversation and not talk about the horrible things that are going on at the border, the way in which, frankly, the governors of Texas and Arizona and Florida are treating human beings that are coming to our country, seeking asylum, legally having a right to be in our country, but treating them like freight. I said earlier today, I viewed immigration from a distance because it wasn't something that directly impacted our city and on a day-to-day basis. Now it does. Now I'm engaged. And I want to make sure that this experience that we're having, we have now about 1,500 migrants that have come to our city since August 31st. We're now getting 2 buses a day. We're building, again, an infrastructure to make sure that we live our values as a welcoming city. And I think there's no greater way that I can evidence that than by making sure that the bonds between my city and this country are as strong as ever. And if we're united and we live our values as a welcoming city and show it through our works and deeds, I think that is to the good for everyone. And it shows that Chicago continues to be a place that stands for justice for all.
I think I'm going to stop asking to applaud because we're not going to finish it. Thank you for the answer. I live in a border city, so I know exactly what you're talking about on the immigration front. What do you think is crucial moving forward? What type of trends do you see changing? You have a diverse point of view. You've been a prosecutor, you've been a mayor, you've been in the private sector. What do you see in the future? What trends should we be thinking about? Not only Mexico, the U.S., Canada, but like even micro trends that you're identifying in your current role.
I think that for me, I have to keep being in the lane of equity and inclusion. When I started as mayor, I would get these kind of quaint looks like, she doesn't really get it. She's talking about investing in neighborhoods, then focus on the downtown, focus quite candidly on the white money business crowd. But that's not how I see my city. I see the entirety of the city. Of course, our downtown area is really critically important. It is the heart that breathes, that pumps the blood to the rest of our city. But I see so much innovation and magic happening all across our city. And my, I think, focus is making sure that I uplift those things that are happening, that I do everything I can to untap the potential that exists in all of our neighborhoods, and that our young people, our children, see themselves in the future of our city. Not just because a black woman sits as the mayor of the city, but because they see opportunity and role models like Martin Cabrera, like David Ignacio, like other people across our city who are doing great work, who understand the importance of hiring from the community, but also understand the importance of giving back and creating opportunities. If I unlock that potential and really push those people that are already doing the great work and bring other people into the fold, then I will, I think, have done a great service to our city for years to come. But we've got to keep pushing. This is not something, we don't undo decades of disinvestment, decades of systemic discrimination in a couple of years. My goal is to set such a solid foundation and raise the expectation of our residents for what they can expect from the government, that long after I fade from the scene and people forget that Lori Lightfoot was ever mayor, that the foundation is rock solid, and that we never ever go back to a time when black and brown people in my city have to fight for crumbs from the table. Those days have to be over, and I'm doing everything I can to make that a reality.
So I'm going to open it up to the crowd. I might have some rapid questions at the end. If you can't spend more than 10 seconds on answering them, but let's see the crowd first. Any questions from the crowd? Don't be shy.
We stun them into silence. Be kind, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you very much, Madam. So, just one quick question. One of the challenges that Chicago has to do with this, let me call it animosity that sometimes happens between the black and brown communities. We've seen a lot of violence in the past few years, gang violence mostly, but in general it's something important, and I know this is something that our consulate has been involved with you, but I would love to hear your thoughts on how to bring these two communities together in a city like Chicago.
Well, I appreciate the question, and I think, frankly, it starts with my presence here, and recognizing as a black woman how important this relationship is, and it's sending that message loud and clear to the entirety of our city, and particularly our black and brown communities. I think there's more than ample opportunities for us to break through the walls of segregation that, frankly, is one of our city's biggest challenges. But bringing together the faith community, which we do on a regular basis, bringing together social services organizations to break out of their own silos and work together, but also as elected officials, making sure that we are speaking of the value and virtue of coming together and finding common ground. I know you know this, but our city is 3/4 black and brown. Think about the possibilities for unity. Think about the possibilities for us to forge deeper and better relationships. They're not there yet, because for far too long, the segregation, I think, has kept us apart and created a cultural mentality that anything that the other gets is less for somebody else. It's not a zero-sum game. There's plenty of opportunity for all of us if we work together. And I truly believe that we will be so much stronger and really raise the quality of life for all of our residents by working together. And I'm not naive about the political realities, I'm not naive about the economic challenges, but I think that we have a unique moment to be able to forge those relationships. I have done everything I could to make sure that we are being extraordinarily inclusive and empowering Latinx leaders as part of my administration. The head of our schools is a Mexican American. The head of our parks is a Puerto Rican woman. The head of our city colleges, also a Mexican man. Here on our delegation, our corporation council, so the chief lawyer for the city is a Mexican woman whose parents were migrant workers in the United States. There's a long list, and again, I've gotten some push from leaders in the black community saying, hey, what are you doing? But I'm being very intentional about making sure that I empower people of various races and ethnicities in our coalition, if you will, in my administration, because we have an incredibly diverse city, and our diversity is one of our great, great strengths. And I want people to understand that, to set the vision for it, and I want to live that vision every single day. But the opportunities to bridge the divide between black and brown Chicago are so deep and profound. We just have to have the will to make it happen.
Hi, good morning. Something that I think is very important for citizens of both Mexico City and Chicago is obviously the subject of safety and crime. What can Mexico City and Chicago learn from each other in this subject, but not only in normal crime, but also when it comes to the matter of police brutality?
Great question. I think there's a couple of things that we have been talking about while we're here. I'm going to be meeting with the Mexico City mayor later this afternoon. What I know profoundly is we cannot just arrest our way out of the problem. We absolutely need to do everything we can in the immediate moment to hold violent, dangerous people accountable. But the longer-term play, if we want to truly bring lasting peace to our cities, is to invest in our people and places. And I'll give you a perfect example. We stood up something that we call the Community Safety Coordination Center a year and a half ago. And we looked at our data and have been focused on the 50 communities in Chicago that drive 50% of our violence. And what we have done is borrowed a couple pages from COVID. We have convened all the city actors who have any piece of community safety into one physical space. We believe that's where you get innovation and the synergies happen. So it's not just the police and fire, but also the public schools, the parks, the libraries, our public health department, our Department of Family and Support Services. All those people come together focusing on these 15 communities. And the other page that we borrowed from COVID is we've established a network, a community partnership, literally down to the block level. And in each of these 15 communities, which are very different from each other, we've asked the basic question: what will it take to bring peace to your neighborhood? So we allow and promote and support the community members to define what safety will mean for them. And then our job as the city is to infuse these neighborhoods with so many resources to support. So everything from making sure that we're clearing vacant lots, making sure that we've got sufficient lighting, picking up garbage, but also making sure the schools and the parks and the libraries are all focused and see their work through a public safety lens. And I'm happy to tell you that overall in our city, we're down 15% in homicides this year, almost 20% in shootings. But in those communities where we focus like a laser beam on a whole of government approach, we're seeing 30, 40, and in some instances, 50% reductions in violent crime. So I can't tell you we've solved everything, but we are clearly onto something where we're co-curating public safety with our neighbors in these communities that have been plagued by violence for far too long. And of course, we must hold the police accountable. Look, I'm a former federal prosecutor, so I am very supportive of our police. And in the United States, this is probably the most difficult time to be the police. I'm a lawyer by training, so I'm used to the lawyer jokes and all of that. But imagine being in a profession where there are people in your community that literally say, "We hate you." We've got a young police force. We're trying to recruit more people into the police force, particularly from Black, brown, Asian neighborhoods, our diversity. That's hard to do when they believe that the community isn't there for them, it doesn't support them. And look, the truth is, based upon polling and anecdotal information, I believe that the vast majority of Chicago residents support the police, with the caveat, of course, that they want them to be respectful, they want them to be real trained, and they want them to engage in constitutional policing and recognize that their most powerful tool is to have the community on their side. And that's something that we are emphasizing every single day. So there's a lot, it's complicated. If public safety was something that was simple to solve, no mayor wouldn't have snapped their fingers and solved it immediately. But what you're talking about for public safety, particularly violence, is a manifestation, in my view, of a lot of factors over many decades that we have not paid attention to. We haven't focused on the root cause of crime, and we haven't focused on long-term solutions. We're turning that around in Chicago, and we're starting to see real progress. Nobody's doing a victory lap here. There's a lot of miles on this journey, but I think we are onto something and headed in the right direction. Thank you for the question.
Take one more question from right there.
Mayor, the single theme of this forum has been the huge opportunity that the integration of our three countries offers. And as the plans are developed in that direction, it's important for this group to identify areas that can offer the optimal conditions to become springboards to activate those strategies. Could you share with this group, important group, why Chicago is maybe a great place for them to consider to expand their businesses and strategies?
That's called a softball question, which I will take advantage of.
I had that, but I decided to let the crowd do it.
Well, I think there's a number of reasons why businesses should think about Chicago, either to be your first beachhead in the United States or to expand your footprint. First of all, we've got the most diverse economy of the country, as I alluded to before. If we were our own country, we would be number 22 in the world. Whether in our core strengths in the diversity of our economy, every single one of those sectors, manufacturing, transportation and logistics, food and agriculture, life sciences, technology of every sort, we are knocking it out of the park. You know, $9 billion last year in investments, so we're going to probably top or exceed that investment record this year. Last year we minted 12 unicorns. We have several more that we minted this year. If you look at the number of companies that are making what we call pro-Chicago decisions, that is companies that are relocating to Chicago, and these are national, international brands like Google, like Kimberly-Clark, like Abbott Laboratories. The list really goes on. They are seeing in Chicago real opportunity that I think would be to the benefit of Mexican businesses coming to our city. When you have that kind of movement and growth, number one market for construction in the United States. I mean, the list goes on, and the strengths of our economy really are second to none. And part of that is, of course, we've got a great pipeline of talent. We've got a lot of innovative business leaders. Our tech sector, as I said, is absolutely booming. We have great university partners that are innovating, particularly in the life science spaces, and then spinning off those businesses to companies that are doing a range of different, I think, innovative and exciting work in really virtually every sector. We have now this pales, I know, in comparison to Mexico City, but we have every year consistently 200,000 college, undergrad, and graduate students in our city that we're building deeper relationships with. So you've got a pipeline of ready talent that is ready to work in our city. I could go on, but I hope you get the point that if you are looking for a great city that is very reasonably priced, you have a great lifestyle, and you have all the benefits of a great global city, sports, entertainment, food, great park system, and of course our beautiful lake, Chicago is second to none in the United States.
I'll ask you one final question. Not going to be rapid fire, but you need to answer fast. Enrique's going to be mad at me, but if you could put in a billboard on Lakeview Drive, one message for the world to see, what would you put?
Chicago's open for business. We want to be a part of the collaborative.
Thank you for the time. I once read that Lee Kuan Yew said that when he was running the government of Singapore, that he was in the business of talent. And I think you made clear to us that talent knows no gender, no sexual preference, no economic background, and you're an example for a lot of us. And coming to Mexico City is a neighbor being example, spending time here to get to know your neighbor country. So on behalf of the Northern Capital Forum, we thank you for coming, and best of luck during your trip.
My great pleasure.